She was born in New Providence, Bahamas, to Robert Rookwood and Clorinda Rookwood nee Vanderpool on May 10, 1930. She grew up in Hay Street and Market Streets over the hill, where she learned to roll hoops, spin tops, and shoot marbles, among other things. She was educated at Mallory's Kindergarten School, St. Agnes School, Western Junior and Senior Schools, the old Government High School, and the Bahamas Teachers College. She attended the University of Hull, England, University of Miami, Loma Linda University Extension, and Florida International University. Her certificates include Cambridge Junior and Senior Certificates, Teacher's Certificate, Associate of the College of Preceptors, ACP London, Certificate of Further Studies in Education, University of Hull, England, Bachelor of Education and Master of Education, both with honors, University of Miami, Doctor of Education, Florida International University, and a Professional Educator Certificate from the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, USA. Her experience spans kindergarten through college. Positions held include the following: classroom teacher, mathematics teacher and department head, senior mistress, vice principal in the Bahamas and Miami, Florida, chairperson of the Teacher Education Department at the College of the Bahamas, now University of the Bahamas, Senior Education Officer at the Ministry of Education with responsibility for mathematics, junior high schools and family island schools, Professor of Education and Mathematics at West Indies College, now Northern Caribbean University in Jamaica, and adjunct lecturer at Andrews University, USA. Her awards include Teacher of the Year, Miami, Florida, Who's Who in American Education, Excellence in Teaching, Member of Professional Women's Board, and other awards. In this episode of Bahamian Heritage Series, 94-year-old Dr. Ruby Charlotte Rookwood-Major.
I am Dr. Ruby Charlotte Rookwood-Major, born May the 10th, 1930, 12 o'clock in the night.
Wow, you even know what time it was. And how old does that make you?
94.
Wow, you look excellent for 94 years old, and you're going to shock us some more, I know. Where were you born?
In Nassau, Bahamas.
Mm-hmm.
They tell me I was born Hay Street West.
Okay.
And then we moved Hay Street East.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm an over the hill girl.
Okay. And who were your parents?
My mother was Clorinda Elisita Vanderpool, married to Robert Alexander Rookwood. Now that Rookwood, in some of the Caribbean islands you will find it spelled Rockwood or Rockwood. But you know how it's like the Light Bonds and the Light Burns and the Fergusons and the Farquharsons, but they all came from the same root, I believe.
Okay. Were both of your parents from the Bahamas as well?
Both of them were from the Bahamas,
Nassau?
from Inagua particularly.
Okay, so both were from Inagua?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have siblings?
Yes, I had an older sister. My older sister was Evelyn. And you know, it's strange with that name. Most people say Evelyn. But she was 15 years older than me.
Oh, that's a big
But
difference.
she was a spiritual inspiration to me. She really acted like an older sister. And for some reason, she helped me out quite a bit.
Right. So it was just one sister?
No, I had a sister named Millicent. She was 2 years older than me, 4 years older than me. Then after me came Olga.
Okay.
Olga Roach. She is down. And then the last one was Dolores Eiffel.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all girls?
All girls. And there was a boy who was stillborn. And among us, we always wished that somebody could come up and say, "We are your brother," by another mother, you know,
Yes,
or something like that. But it never happened.
I know the feeling because there was only two of us girls, and I always wished I had a brother. But you know what I notice a lot about people I interview that are, say, over 70 or 80 is that most of them had siblings who died. And it just shows you how far we have come, because nowadays you could be born 5 months, 4 months, and they put you in special care baby units, and they can keep you alive until your lungs are mature, and they have all the medication. But
Right.
back in those days, they didn't have that. So a lot of babies died. In just about every single person I interviewed over 80, they say they had siblings who died
Well,
at birth or shortly after birth.
my sister Millicent, they had already decided which shoebox they were going to bury her in.
Oh, wow.
Because she was born with, and she had what they call polio today,
Oh.
infantile paralysis or something like that,
Okay,
and they were getting ready to bury her.
Oh.
But we had a Pentecostal cousin in our family, and she used to come every day and sing and shout for Millie. And one day Millie started to move.
Wow.
You know,
Boy,
Millie lived to be 70 years old.
God answers prayer.
Mhm.
Awesome. Okay. What about your grandparents? Were you familiar with them?
Oh yes, I knew my grandparents. That's how we became Seventh-day Adventists. Was
Okay.
through our grandparents. My grandfather was James Vanderpool from Tortola in the Virgin Islands.
Okay.
And he met my grandmother in Inagua because he used to run on one of those big ships that delivered goods to some of our islands, Haiti and Ragged Island and some of those islands. And he met my grandmother. And you know, it's something interesting about my mother. We always say she was born in Inagua, but here's the story behind her. He married my grandmother, but he was still running on the ship.
Okay.
And he knew that when the ship went to Haiti, it was going to stay for a couple of months. And so he took her with him on the ship because he didn't want her to be alone. And my mother was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
she was born in
Interesting.
And we knew that, but we didn't know that she could speak the language.
Okay.
You know, and 2 weeks before she died, the first time we heard her speak the language.
Wow.
You know, yeah. One day my sister was giving a bath and she started speaking it.
Okay.
You know, and yeah, her story was very interesting.
Very, very.
Very interesting.
So what about the grandparents on your father's side?
I didn't know my grandmother because she died 3 days before I was born.
Okay.
And they named me after her.
Okay.
My middle name was Charlotte. And just because they said she was an old lady, I didn't want to be named after her. And his father was George. I think his name was George Rookwood. But here's another interesting thing about him. My dad, his picture's right up there. He could have passed for Conky Joe.
Okay.
You know, and he was a World War I veteran. And he had a brother who was just like my complexion. But he had his sisters and other family were jet black.
Wow.
And
Interesting.
in fact, one of his sisters was so dark they called her Daya.
It's something our genes working.
Oh yes.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Well, you know, my maternal grandmother was one of 13 siblings. But we don't know anything much about the rest of our siblings.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
there's one sibling we knew. She used to come to Nassau, but my grandmother was a nurse.
Okay.
In those days, they called them midwives. You know, and she was more than that because she used to treat patients for other things.
Right.
You know, and she was probably the oldest one. And when they wanted to come into Nassau, they all would come and start off in house.
Okay.
And it's amazing how these small homes used to accommodate so many people.
Boy, amazing. Okay. Do you remember much about Hay Street back in those days?
A little.
Yeah.
Hay Street, the Moxies were there. We had the Bells, Cambridges. We had Mrs. Newbold, we had Robinsons, and down we had Mackies, Mallory's.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
A lot. And you know, in fact, during the time when I was growing up, we who lived in that time, we knew everybody from what we call Nassau. Nassau was a small place.
Yeah.
And even out east, up to the pond, we knew people.
Right.
So whenever somebody dies now, and I look and see they are 70 or so, and I look, I say, I have to know that person. You know? And it's interesting when workmen come here, even with the television or the washing machine, I try to find out who your grandparents and most of the times I discovered that I had taught your grandparent or somebody, and we knew each other,
Yes.
you know.
This is a small country when you consider, especially like you say, people who are over a certain age. Almost in every case, if you don't know them personally, you know someone they are connected to.
That's true.
Of course, things are changing now. I mean, we have people, there's so much of an influx that in many cases you can't really make the connection. But if you try hard enough, with most people you can.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So Hay Street, was it like a family kind of thing going on, or like
Everybody
how did you
truly
get-
knew everybody, you know.
Yeah.
There were some people who we know somebody when Mr. Murray had a tall wall, and he had that wall because he didn't want children bothering him, you know.
Yeah.
But and there was another lady, I don't remember her name, but she had a special tree in her yard, tamarind or some other tree. And Stanley told me, that was after we got married, he told me, he said the lady liked him so much, he was the only child she would let climb the tree, you know.
So he lived in that area too?
He lived in that area, that's how I got to know him.
Okay.
Yeah, we were neighbors.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, do you remember what the house looked like that you grew up in?
Yeah. It was a wooden house. And it had a porch that went 3/4 around the house.
Okay.
Because my mother was a cook, she was the best cook in the world. And she used to sell coconut tarts and sauce and hot rolls and everything on the porch on Saturdays, you know. And to us, it was only 2 bedrooms. You had a living room, you had a kitchen, we had an outside toilet.
Okay.
But the outside toilet was so kept that we could bathe in there.
Right.
Take the tub with the water and everything and bathe in there, you know. And we were poor, but you didn't realize that you were poor because we were never hungry. My mother knew how to make things. Guava duff, the way we make guava duff today. She used to beat the sauce with a fork, you know. And whatever she had, she put her hands to that. That came out wonderful, wonderful.
Wow. So, what type of work did your parents do?
Now, my dad was a carpenter by trade. But in those days, whatever you could find to do, we would do. One time he was an overseer. They call him another name now, correction officers.
Okay.
He told us stories about that. He was an overseer, and in his final days of life, he worked at BEC, I think it was, and he retired from there. An interesting thing about him was that after a number of years, he became what we call in those days hard of hearing.
Okay.
He was not able to hear so well, and the doctors told him it was because of the exploding bombs, and when he went to the World War One,
Okay. So,
that affected him. You know, and you know, of course, you know your history. They said in World War One, the black people were kitchen people or whatever. I don't know where he worked, but he told us they were taught that when the siren go off for the bombs, you should get down on the floor because the bombs exploded in a direction like that. And he heard a number of them, you see.
oh wow.
And when he came back after a number of years, he experienced this hard of hearing, you know.
How old was he when he died?
77.
Okay.
Yeah, he was 77 years old. But
So, what about your mother?
my mother died, she was 94. That's like, you know, I came to 94 with trepidations. She died 6 months after she was 94. So my daughter always teases me that that's what I'm worried about. But she wasn't sick, really.
Okay.
The doctor said she died from natural
causes.
Yeah, her body just started to shut down. But she was a hard worker, you know.
So, what was her career?
She was a cook.
Okay.
And in the early days, in the hotels, people used to go there to do laundry for people, and the people used to allow them to bring the laundry home, and she would do laundry.
Okay.
And she also did laundry for the military people, the policemen, the RAF, and people like that. You know, so she that was her area, and she crocheted. She did straw bags, just anything that she could put her hand on to just make some money.
Back in those days, people were really industrious, eh?
Yes, that's right.
And I'm sure they encourage you all to be the same.
The same, that's right.
Yeah. So, what school did you go to?
Wow. I started off at Mallory's preschool.
Okay.
I'm 3 years old. You know.
Wow, 3.
At 3 years old, Ruth White and I went to school. She and her sister, we went to school together. She was my buddy. And from there we went to St. Agnes had a school. And to this day, I don't know why they call that school the Copper Bread School.
What they call it?
Copper Bread School. And I wondered whether only a few of us, but I saw other people who were buried from there, big politicians and everybody, and they mentioned that we went to this Copper Bread School.
Interesting.
And I'm still trying to find out why it was called Copper Bread School. You know, I went to the Copper Bread School. It was so interesting. Ruth and I went to that school. The first day, they promoted us in the morning. When we went to the next teacher in the afternoon, they promoted us once more. And we got promoted twice. Wow. So that tells me twice in 1 week that Mrs. Mallory must have known what she was doing.
Yes.
You know, that's right, because together we moved up the ladder, you know, and even when it came to, although I moved to the States and she was here, at the end we did the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, we did the same thing. She was the maid of honor in my wedding, and she was really one of my best friends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Is she still with us?
She's dead now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So from there I went to, they called it Smith School in those days, but it's Western Junior School.
Okay.
It was named after a lady who was the principal there, and she did so well. People always said the school belonged to her.
Is that the school off of Shirley Street?
No, that's up Market Street.
Okay.
Yeah, Market Street now. So I went there, and then I went to Western Senior School. And in those days, people were going to Government High School, but you had to pay 10 guineas. That's £10 10.
Okay.
And they usually chose the kids who they thought were the smart ones. But I had nobody to pay for me, you know.
I didn't realize they used to pay.
Yeah, 10 guineas.
Okay.
But I eventually got a scholarship. So you could have gone there from 11 to 15. I think I went there either 14 or 15. But Miss Molly Albury, who was the principal of the school, she really wanted to help me. You know, because Ruth Wright and I just spoke to somebody recently who passed, and he remembered Ruth and I. He said, I asked him, do you remember Ruth White? He said, yeah, you and Ruth, y'all were two smartest girls in class, you know.
So this Government High was when it was opposite the British Colonial Hilton.
Right, out there. Oh, interesting stories about that. And
so you got a scholarship?
I got a scholarship.
About how old were you?
I think I believe I was 15. But my problem was I was asthmatic.
Oh, okay.
And it kept me back. I repeated, you know, it kept me back. But now, that was how I came to love mathematics. Because, in the government schools, the Western Senior, they only taught you certain things, algebra, geometry, when you got up to 7th grade. And 7th grade then is 9th grade now, or 10th, okay? And I used to have asthma so much that I missed out on that. So when I went to Government High that first year, I failed math.
Oh, wow.
And I could remember Dr. Peggs kept me in one afternoon to repeat some work that I had, and he made me do that 10 times. 10 times. And I think it was the 8th time, he looked at me and he said, Rookwood, your tears do not move me, dry them. And after I got that, then I really became interested in math. When I graduated from Government High, you know, my prayer the last year of my tenure, my stay there was, Lord, please give me a job. And believe me, I used to say, even if I only got 10 shillings a week, I wanted a job, you know, because one of the main things in my mind, I wanted to become a teacher. Why? I knew that the teachers who were teaching me, they were doing their best, but I knew it could be done a better way.
Yes.
And I wanted to find that better way. And well, of course, I became interested in figures, and then some people were urging me, why don't you try to go to the Treasury to work in the accounts department or something like that. But the Lord fixed that for me, because if I had gone to one of those jobs, I'd had to wait half day on Sabbaths.
Right.
And I'm telling you, in those early days, the Sabbath keepers were Sabbath keepers.
Yes.
Special, strict and everything, you know what I mean? And so when I got the job to teach, I started, well, let me finish where I was trained. Okay, after Government High, I went to Teachers College.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the first Teachers College for our generation, as it were. And we were in the first group.
Right.
Okay, and we did well in that group. Right from there, after I got married when I was finishing off the Teachers College.
How old were you?
I was 21.
Okay.
21. And but I never stopped studying. I kept on studying even after I got married and started to have my children. I got up 3 o'clock in the morning. I was always studying something.
So what was your husband's name?
Stanley Alfred Major. Yeah. And today, since he died, I could just see all the qualities. I look at him and I call him, he was a spiritual gentleman. Because we were just friends.
So were you an Adventist when you married him?
Yeah, he was too.
Okay.
You know, when I knew him, he was not an Adventist. But he saw this Adventist family and he wanted to know what it was all about.
Okay.
And so he got attached to us.
Okay. So when did you become an Adventist?
Now, at the age of 4 or 5, my grandmother, they were in the first baptism for Grandstown Seventh-day Adventist Church. And so she used to take her grandchildren. So every Sabbath we used to go to Grandstown Seventh-day Adventist Church, and on Sundays we went to Zion Baptist Church, and Talmud Sands was the pastor. And that happened because my dad was a member of Zion Baptist.
Right.
My mother was a member of St. Agnes. So we were all, you know, and
making the rounds.
Right, that's right. So we knew a lot of people, you know, but we went to those 2 churches until we got to the place where we could make a decision for ourselves.
Right.
And we decided to go to the Grandstown Church. And in those days, you couldn't congregate in the church pews or in the aisles to talk. You had to go to church in heart. You know, you couldn't clap in church like how they clapping for everything now. You couldn't clap in church. And so I always say that my wedding day was special to me, and I'm going to give you some reasons why it was special. In those days, it was difficult to find another Seventh-day Adventist to get married to. Some people held out and became old maids or whatever, and then the other people who won them over first and brought them in. But Stanley, being a Seventh-day Adventist, had nothing to do with me. At least that's from my point of view. But let me tell you, whenever there was a Seventh-day Adventist wedding, crowds of people came to see this wedding. No rings and all like that. They wanted to see the special wedding.
It was different.
Yeah, it was different. And I got married on July 17, 1951 at 3:30 in the afternoon. And I remember when that car turned from Farm Road, Market Street, turned into the street where Grandstown Church is, you could see the people in the road.
Wow.
And when I got into the church was full. People, some were invited, but they just wanted to see this wedding, you know. And I was so pleased, you know, that so many people came to, to see it. And well, I got married in July, but my wedding dress was completed in April. I went to the famous lady called Anna Bethel.
Okay.
Yeah, she was Cecil Bethel's wife.
Okay.
And she knew us from going to his house for evening school and all like that. And I went there and she helped me choose the dress. I got married in a French Chantilly lace dress. She went to the States and she usually would buy the materials for her brides. She bought my material, I gave her the money. She brought my shoes and everything. And she came to the house to dress me.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
And so then she took me to the door of the church. You know? Everybody was so into these Seventh-day Adventist, marriages.
Right.
You know? And so I felt good. You know? And then the young man who I was marrying, Sandy we were friends. We just talked. He used to come and tell, I took him like an older brother.
Okay.
I could ask him any question. He would give me advice. When these guys say this or they say that and stuff and all like that. And then, we came together and we got married. And he was just 5 months older than I was.
Okay.
But now the person who caused him to become an Adventist, Mildred Gordon. I don't know if you ever heard of that name. Sharice Neely's mother.
Oh, I don't know.
Mildred was one of my best friends, and Mildred said to him, they gave us some books to read in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Little pamphlets, when your knight comes riding, and the rose among the thorns.
Mm-hmm.
Nice little pamphlet that you could read to say what happens if you go, what you do and stuff and all like that.
Right.
And he had another book, What is Wrong with the Movies. And Mildred gave Stanley this book. After we were finished reading it, she said, now when you finish reading this book, if you go to the movies again, I would know what to think of you.
Wow.
And he was a person who wanted people to think well of him.
Mm-hmm.
And he told us the story of how he finished reading that book, and he went to the movie, and while he was sitting there, the words of that book came to him, and he walked out and he never went back.
Wow.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
And so Mildred took it to the next step. Mildred said, would you like to study about all the things that we've been telling you about? And he said, yeah, I don't mind. So when she went to Pastor Jones, who was in charge of Grandstand Church then, he said, who's this guy who you want me to give Bible studies to? She said, he's just an honest seeker after truth.
Mm-hmm.
And Pastor Jones said, you sure he isn't seeking somebody else? She said, no, he's seeking truth. And he was the one who married us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Interesting.
And so the story is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at him, he's a spiritual gentleman. He was so nice to me. He treated me so nice. In the mornings, I could get him to go and early in the day and buy stuff for me to make lunch to take to school. We were just little friends.
Mm-hmm.
And anything I wanted to know, I asked him, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just won his heart, wanted, you know, stuff into my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents loved him. Anybody we met just really loved him.
He definitely was a gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
Very decent, nice person. Kind. You know, a lot of people knew him. He was also a very handsome man.
Yeah, that's true.
So, what happened after Government High?
After Government High, I went to Teachers College,
Mm-hmm.
and then I went into teaching.
Yes, you said
And
that.
2 years before Teachers College, I went into teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a general class teacher. I taught in fact, let me put this in here. I had the privilege of teaching every section. I taught kindergarten, I taught elementary or primary, I taught junior, I taught junior high,
Mm-hmm.
I taught senior high, and I taught college and university.
Wow.
And so I didn't really notice until one director of education said, Ruby, look at your record here.
Mm-hmm.
You taught every grade, you know.
Mhm.
And I was, so my background experience was...
And you taught math the whole time?
Not all the way. I started off in elementary,
Mm-hmm.
and after I got married, I had Dawn my first child was in 1952, and when I went to Eastern Senior to teach, they found out that I had done well in math, you know.
Okay.
And I would inject here too that a math teacher is different from a mathematician. A math person may know all of those math, but the math teacher is the one who knows how to get them to, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And through my experience, I found out that most is strange, but mostly the good math teachers we had were female persons. And usually what happens when you're looking for administrators, go to the math people. Math people, because you see, people think that math is only figures. It's not only figures. It helps you develop your reasoning ability. You could make comparison.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking, and I can pick out things that look like squares and circles and all those different things. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a person who really learns the math. You could reason. It helps you to even reason.
Your reasoning ability is
Exactly.
developed. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Okay.
And,
So you taught the entire time from kindergarten straight through
right. That's
to
right.
university.
Straight through. And I taught geography. I taught English.
Mm-hmm.
I taught woodwork theory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I taught all of those things because in those days you had to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I taught. The only one thing I didn't teach was a foreign language or art.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like art.
Right.
I liked foreign language, but I didn't teach.
So you weren't educated in the true sense of the word.
Exactly. And the icing on my career was having the chance to teach teachers.
Okay.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
I taught teachers. When I worked at the College of the Bahamas, as chairperson of the teacher education department. And when I went to West Indies College, now NCU, I taught teachers curriculum, test and measurement, and different things like that. And I enjoyed that aspect of it,
Right.
helping the teachers to become better teachers. You know? Because I always felt that, you see, in the early days, it was right in the height of discrimination and stuff and all like that. A lot of teachers, a lot of ladies who were teachers and all like that, people were afraid. A lot of people were afraid to launch out. You understand? I was not afraid to do it. And I remember Ruth Clark, Susan Wallace, I didn't want to be all. Some of us were in Government High, some of us were in Teachers College. And we were the first group of people that really wanted to go into high schools to teach. And when we got into the high schools, we really worked and did a good job. Interested in the students, you wanted to see the students do well, and you wanted to help your fellow teachers.
Right.
And so we enjoyed that aspect of it. And so when I went to Eastern Senior, I taught classes for all boys, and I wasn't afraid of it.
No.
You know, I taught James Catlin and Lowell Mortimer and different people like that, you know. And when I went there, the principal of the school, Mr. Davis, a wonderful educator, he said to me, Mrs. Major, I've had more than 3 teachers to this all boys class. Norman gave us in the class, James Catlin and all of them. And he said, they couldn't make it. He said, so I went to the Board of Education, it was then, he said, and I said to them, you don't choose the person, let me see some files and let me choose some people. He said, and he chose me.
Okay.
You know, he heard some things and he chose me. He said, now, I don't want you to let me down. I said, no. And I went to that class. And you had to handle the bullies. So teaching math and all these other things, you need to know how to manage your class. And I remember there was a bully in that class. Today, he's a big time bishop. Big fellow too. And he was the one who caused the teachers not to stay. But nobody told me about it. But the first week that I was there, what the bully used to do, put up this little fella to give trouble to the teacher. And then when the teacher deal with him, they come and deal, you know. And I always say, really, Lord, I probably wasn't converted at that time. But this little fella in the front seat, little fella, I mean, and he was carrying on. And I keep telling him, you know, and I gave him 3 times, you know. And third time, I just picked him up like this, put him there and shook him and put him down. I say, now you behave yourself. Then here comes the big bully from the back. He said, now teacher, why you do this little boy like that? And I was ready for him. I told him, I said, look, I don't care how big you are, whatever you are, you're not going to stop me from teaching and stop these students from learning. So you better get out of the class and then you learn your way. And once I handled him, everything went well.
Yeah.
And I had the privilege of meeting him after he got married and had almost two teenage students. And I met him one day coming into the airport. I said, do you remember me? He said, teacher, how can I forget you? And he called the teacher and said, see this lady who changed my life. Said, I remember the poem Invictus that she did with us.
Yeah.
And so I've had experiences with people.
Right.
Yeah. You know.
And while you were teaching, you were still learning, right?
Exactly.
Because you eventually got your PhD degree. Right?
Yeah, I did. I got that late. You know. And my professors who were in charge of me when I was doing my doctorate, they say, you know, Ruby, you are they gave me the name deliberate learner. When you want to do something, he said, you really go and do it and you do it well. You know?
So how did you juggle all of that? Because you had children, you had a husband.
Exactly.
And you were involved in so many things. How did
In
you
the
manage
church,
it?
well, let me tell you, I got up 3 o'clock every morning.
Oh, wow.
And I studied from 3 to 5. And then I started doing work around the house. Because sometimes I had to drop the children to school and all like that. But they called me a professional student, you know. But I kept, and I always liked to learn something. The only one thing I regret that I haven't learned, I already wanted to speak foreign language, either Spanish or French or even Creole or something like that. But I never got the opportunity. I tried on music and every single day I tried.
Right.
And sometimes I could say maybe I was selfish. That's why I sent all my children to music.
Wow.
Yeah, everyone except the last one, Roy D. Well. Every single one of them could play and sing.
Wow. So how many children did you have?
7.
What are their names?
Dawn is going to be 72 next month. Colin will be 71 in August. Keith will be 70 next month. He and Dawn have the same birthday. That's 3. Then there's Craig, and Stanley, and Ricardo, and Roddy. And they're all musical. We have a joke now. I tell them, everything good you all do, that's your daddy's gene. I say, when you do anything not so good, I say it's mine.
With all of the teaching, learning, and everything that you've done in your life, what's some of the advice that you would give to young people nowadays? Well, first of all, before I even ask that, not many people get to the age that you are and still have some semblance of health and have their brain capacity functioning like yours. It is truly a blessing. What is the secret to that? What would you say is the reason? Because really it's not usual. It's actually the exception.
I know. But I have often said to myself, I may be poor, but I didn't feel that I was poor, because we never went to bed hungry or anything like that. But my mother was able to read and write, my dad was able to read and write, and they always said, whatever you have here in your head, nobody could take from you.
Right.
And they wanted you to do well, and I made up my mind. I was a determined learner. Whenever I went to an institution to work, I tried to learn everything I could about it, and I never gave up. What I did, I couldn't go to college right from school because my parents didn't have the money, but I did through correspondence and Woolsey Hall and did all those kinds of things,
So it sounds to me like you insisted on making your brain function.
Exactly.
To think, to learn, because there's a saying that most people don't even use a small portion of their brain. But you have practiced learning, and by learning, your brain functions. It's almost like exercise.
And being a teacher.
Okay, that too. It actually forces you to stay.
The students that come into my portfolio, I told them, we are not in competition with anybody else. You're in competition with yourself. And I usually, when they come to my classroom, the first thing I do, I explain to them that because you don't know math doesn't mean you're not smart. I said, you like history. I didn't like history in school, but I never failed it. I said, all the different things. You're smart in certain areas, but you need the math. The math completes. I hear people say, we don't have any reason to do it, but you have reason for the math. And I had a chapel one morning when I said Bahamas Academy, and I got all the subject teachers to come and tell the students how you could use math in the subject.
Wow.
And they say you could really, and they take it to mean that, well, I'm living and I don't know. I said, not like that. You have to know some math. If you are a dressmaker and somebody says the dress is 10 inches too wide in the skirt, you know not to take it in 10 inches on one side. You have to
on both sides.
On both sides, you see. And whatever you are doing, and when you're cooking, you have to use some, even if you don't measure it. Somebody they say you measured something in your hand or in mind's eye, so you use math there.
Yeah, even when we don't know we're using it.
That's right. That's quite right. And math helps to develop you. And what I usually tell the students, I say now, when you finish with this class, you're gonna like math. And what I do first, I give them a quiz for me to see where they were. A pre-test, you call that. And sometimes some of them get 0, some get 1. I say, now this doesn't count towards your final grade. I say, this just tells us where you are now. And I say, each time, if you got 5 in this one and you got 8 in the next one, that's an improvement. And I show them, not because somebody is smart, because when I worked at a certain college, somebody came looking for Dr. Major, and they came to my office. Would I direct them? I said, I'm Dr. Major. You Dr. Major? You understand?
Mm-hmm.
And so, being a woman, you know, you have to fight to make it.
Yes.
And that's the one thing that I keep asking the Lord to forgive me for, because I had to fight. You know, I had to fight to get recognition. You had to fight for people to realize who you are. You know,
Yes.
and still today people don't.
Yeah, not much has changed in that respect.
No, because you're a woman. And what I've noticed though, all the people who were doing well were the female teachers, but they were people who laid their head on the line for the students. You know, they put their head on the line for your students. My students, I always told them, don't watch anybody else, watch your grades. And the key is you must try to understand. Try to understand from the beginning. And that's the problem now with, I like this math topic. That's the problem with the students in math today.
Yeah.
They don't understand the basics. And the Ministry of Education need to know that you should send some of your good teachers in the elementary school so the students can learn the basics.
Yes.
And if you learn the basics, you can teach yourself. Yeah, you can really teach yourself.
Right. So what advice would you give to young people today? You've been around a long time. What is some major advice that you would give?
Stick to it. First of all, you got to determine that I want to be the best that I can be. If God says you're an A person, a C or a B wouldn't do.
Right.
But you have to put God first. And God will help you through everything.
Yes.
You stick to it. You do the best in every way you can. You're determined to help others.
Yes.
And help yourself as you're going along. In my teaching, especially at the university or the high school level, I never went to class without first going over my lesson. And the point about it too, the part about helping others, if you help others, it helps to consolidate things in your own mind.
Yes. Okay.
And no matter what happens, don't give up. If you have to take an exam twice, keep studying.
Dr. Major
keep doing
is
it.
a Phoenix
But don't
Lifetime Achievement
give up.
Award recipient of the Government High School Alumni. A lover of young people, has served her church in various positions, including Sabbath school leader and teacher, Pathfinder director, master guide, church clerk, associate treasurer, school board member, youth leader, and choir member. Dr. Major enjoys reading, knitting, listening to music, solving puzzles, playing Scrabble, working with young people, encouraging others, and loving and sharing with her family. She is determined to reach heaven and to help others get there. At the age of 94, she spends much time serving Jesus and encouraging others to do the same. In this episode of Bahamian Heritage Series, we salute Dr. Ruby Charlotte Rookwood-Major.